Welcome, everybody. I am Madeline from the National Fair Housing Alliance. Before we get started, I just wanted to note a couple housekeeping items. First is that this session is going to be recorded. It's currently being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be made available after the meeting concludes. We will take audience questions towards the end of the meeting, so please submit your questions via the chat function in your Zoom window. The chat function is in the bottom right-hand corner of Zoom. In the unlikely event that the session is Zoom bombed, we will immediately end the meeting and I will send a follow-up email to everybody who has registered and we will rejoin. Finally, there's closed captioning available provided today in English. To view the closed captioning, you can click on the CC button at the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom window. If you don't see the CC button, you may find an ellipses with the word more, and from there, you will see closed captioning. Everybody on this panel will be muted except for our expert speakers and panelists. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Ms. Lisa Rice.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Rice. I'm the president and CEO of the National Fair Housing Alliance, the nation's only national nonprofit civil rights agency dedicated to eliminating all forms of housing discrimination. Thank you so much for joining us for this important discussion about providing access to credit for small businesses. I'm grateful to be partnering on this event with the Center for Responsible Lending and LISC, two great organizations working every day to provide credit and financial services to consumers and small businesses throughout the country. Together, our organizations are championing the effort to ensure that businesses owned by people of color, women, and other underserved groups, local businesses that are really the lifeblood of our neighborhoods, are able to obtain the opportunities and the credit they deserve. Communities without credit are communities without hope. And we're joining forces this evening to bring hope to businesses who are left out of the Paycheck Protection Program and left out of the many programs developed by the Department of Treasury and the Federal Reserve in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm really honored that Senator Ben Cardin is joining us this evening. He is a great champion for small businesses, and we're blessed to have him working so ardently to ensure that small businesses remain viable and can thrive through the pandemic. And we're indeed in the throes of not just a health pandemic, but also an economic pandemic. Both are disproportionately impacting businesses and consumers of color. If you're looking for answers or wondering what you can do to help, you've come to the right place. And we're really doubly privileged this evening because our moderator for this session also happens to be a champion of small businesses, the one and only April Ryan, White House correspondent, CNN contributor, and correspondent for the American Urban Radio Networks. April has served on the board of the prestigious White House Correspondents Association and is an esteemed member of the National Press Club. She is a prodigious author, and if you have not read her latest book, At Mama's Knee, I urge you to order it today. It is really the food for our souls that we need in times like these. April is a dear friend to the civil rights community, and it is my distinct honor and privilege to present to you Miss April Ryan.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's such an honor to be with you yet again for such a worthy cause. And I'm honored to be a part of this conversation, directing capital to small businesses in underserved communities, challenges and opportunities in the wake of COVID-19. And this conversation is so important, particularly for a time such as this. We just had the Democratic National Convention. I hope you watched. If you didn't, go back and look it up. You can still YouTube, Google, all that stuff. And we're in the midst right now of the Republican National Convention. No matter what you think, I still want you to watch as well, because this is all about you. Politics is about people and humanity, and that's one thing that we forget. But once again, about this conversation, it's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. Much of my focus as a journalist has been on the harm caused to our local and national economies when we fail to support small business. So I'm glad to be here. I'm going to start with a short conversation with Senator Ben Cardin and then pivot to a discussion with some of the nation's leading experts on building and expanding equity for small businesses, and in particular, businesses owned by people of color and women. So let's dig right in. It's my privilege to be speaking with Senator Ben Cardin, a major voice and champion for small business. Senator Cardin hails from the great state of Maryland. He is my senator. I claim him. Yes, I do. He is also the co-sponsor of the Save the Americans Main Street Act and the Unlocking Opportunities in Emerging Markets Act. And he has worked tirelessly to ensure PPP, Paycheck Protection Program funds that go to businesses owned by people of color. And Senator Cardin, the floor is yours, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, April. Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for everything you do, April Ryan. Thank you, Lisa Rice. I appreciate your leadership on behalf of responsible lending and home ownership and housing. You're one of our great champions. So let me just say where we are. We know that there's challenges in minority communities, in the underbanked community, in getting the type of financial help in order to be able to start businesses, to expand businesses. We know all that before COVID-19. We also know that when you go through an economic downturn, unless the federal government takes aggressive steps, those businesses that were not doing well with equality before the pandemic or before the emergency are going to emerge in worse shape. When we went through the 2008 Great Recession, a lot of the gains that we had made over the years was lost in helping minority businesses and those in the underbanked and underserved communities. So we need to be mindful of that as we deal with this pandemic. So I've had the opportunity as the ranking Democrat on the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee to help craft the tools that we have available for small businesses. And I work with Senator Rubio, the Republican chair. I'm the Democratic ranking member. And we work together in order to provide tools because we recognize small businesses are the growth engine of America's economy. That's where we get most of our job growth and innovation. And we wanted to make sure that small businesses could survive this pandemic, which not only, of course, affected the public health, it affected our economic health. And we developed the Paycheck Protection Program. The goal of the Paycheck Protection Program was to get money out quickly to small businesses to save small businesses. And it was successful. Over 5 million small businesses participated in the Paycheck Protection Program. These are forgivable loans. We gave out more than $500 billion in loans that are forgivable. And it was out quickly. We anticipated when we passed this in March that our economy would be back on track by now. In fact, it's not back. We need to do more. And I had an amendment that I offered to the Paycheck Protection Program, recognizing that minority small businesses, those in underserved and underbanked communities, would have a hard time getting to the front of the line with their bank on a 7A loan that's forgivable, that there would be special efforts made in order to make sure the underbanked community was properly served. In fact, the General Accounting Office, in surveying how the Small Business Administration handled the PPP program, observed that, in fact, the Small Business Administration did not carry out the intent of Congress to help special efforts in the underserved community. We had a hard time getting information from the Small Business Administration as to how the loans were being made. And quite frankly, we were very disappointed to find that those efforts left behind a lot of our minority small businesses, a lot of our rural small businesses, and those that did not have an established banking relationship with a bank that was willing to make the loan. The smaller small businesses, the banks weren't interested in these loans. They're interested in the larger of the small businesses because of the size of the loan. So when it came time to replenish the funds, we walled off a certain amount of the funds for mission lenders, recognizing that mission lenders would be in a better position to help the underbanked and underserved communities. And it did help. There's no question about that. But as we go forward, we also recognize we have to make sure that the economic injury disaster loan program, the EIDL program, is available, because we find that the businesses that participate in the EIDL program, which are larger amounts of dollars, are usually the minority businesses. There's a higher percentage of the smaller small businesses, which have a higher number of the minority small businesses. But as we look to the second round, and that's what we're negotiating now, and the House has already passed their bill. Senator McConnell has not brought a bill to the floor, and we should have had one by now. We want to make sure that we deal directly with those that were not treated as well as they should have been on the CARES Act on the first round. We want to build up capacity within minority communities for lenders. And I've introduced legislation with Senator Booker that does exactly that, but beefing up funds going to the Cdfis and the minority depository institutions so that there's greater capacity to give out loans in the minority community. We also have efforts to try to deal with some of the existing programs under Small Business Administration. The microloan program works well for the underbanked and underserved communities. We think there should be more direct loans and direct forgivable loans by the Small Business Administration to small businesses, because we know if it's the government giving out the loans, the size of the loan will make no difference, and we can get and reach the underserved community. So we're asking for additional help, particularly through the EIDL program, which are direct loans by SBA to the underserved communities. We also think we can improve the 7A Community Advantage program by making that permanent. And we could do things with fee waivers to make it easier for the underserved community to be able to get help. The bottom line is we need to do better. We don't want, when we come out of this pandemic, to be in the same position as we were with the Great Recession and find that a lot of the progress we made to deal with the wealth gap in America has been moved in the wrong direction. We recognize through entrepreneurship and opportunity, we can narrow the wealth gap in America. We can do something about systemic historic racism and make sure that we do what's right for the people of this country. That's what we're fighting for, and that's what I would like to see us do in the next round. With that, let me give it back to you. And April, I'd be glad to engage in some questions and try to answer some of your questions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And you know, this is so important. Small business is the engine of this country. But when we think about small business and minority small business owners, it's so important as well, because like many other sectors, minorities, people of color, and women tend to be behind the curve and many issues. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My dad was a small business owner. My brother is a small business owner, and I try myself to dabble in small business myself. So this is important. It's for everyone to really take a listen. But first, Senator Cardin, my first question to you. The New York Fed recently found that 40% of recipients from Black-owned businesses are concentrated in just 30 counties, roughly 1% of all counties in this country. Of these counties, approximately 2/3 are among the areas with the highest level of COVID-19 cases. Meanwhile, data also shows an estimated decline in Black-owned businesses between February and April of this year. It's 41%. And a 32% decline for Latino-owned businesses. We also know that Black-owned firms are less likely to have a borrowing relationship with a bank. We've seen numerous proposals on how to improve PPP and small business recovery, including more funding for PPP with targeting to smaller businesses and even new loan products. So Senator Cardin, will a new loan product be useful in addressing the compounded impacts of long-term exclusion in the current pandemic and recession for businesses owned by people of color, or should solutions include non-debt support such as direct grants?
April, it's a great question. What we do know is that COVID-19 has had a much more devastating impact on minority businesses. We know those that have been directly impacted by COVID-19, a larger percentage of minorities have been struck by the virus. We know that the death rate is higher. We also know that business failures are higher. We also know that in the first round of PPP, the size of the loans were not as great in minority communities as they were in the non-minority communities. We also know that the speed of getting money out was quicker, again, in the non-minority communities than it was in the minority communities. So we know we have to do a better job. Your question is, do we need a new type of program?
Yes.
Should it be targeted? The answer is that we have to have targeted help. Yeah. And yes, we can look at a program, but my favorite is to do something that doesn't necessarily depend on having an established relationship with a lender, because the lenders are going to be more interested in dealing business with the larger small businesses, which could exclude minority small businesses in the right number. So we have a program today. It's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, direct loans by the SBA. Why don't we look at targeting that? We do have a grant program that I authored under the EIDL program. These are grants. We wanted them to be $10,000. Instead, the average grant's been about $4,000. So we could provide a grant program under the SBA targeted to the underserved communities. Or we could look at the EIDL program and provide forgivable loans under the EIDL program to the underbanked and underserved communities. So we have the mechanism today to deliver the help. I don't really have a preference as to whether it's a new program or modifying an existing program. I want to make sure it's targeted, targeted to those who have been left out, those that have been really devastated by COVID-19, and those that traditionally have not gotten the same degree of help in regards to entrepreneurship. That's where I want to see it targeted.
So, but what about the issue of direct grants? Because there are people who are still screaming they want grants. What do you think about that?
Well, the EIDL program for the first time provides direct grants. These are grants, not loans, up to $10,000. It was a program that I helped author. Yes, we can build on that program to give direct grants, because quite frankly, these businesses cannot take on more loans. They don't have the capacity to pay now. So they need grants in order to be able to survive. When we passed the CARES Act, we thought we would be back with a performing economy by now. We don't have that yet. So yes, grants are absolutely essential. I support grants. I think we got to expand grants. I think we can do that through the EIDL program because we already have established a grant program under the EIDL program. You don't have to go to a bank. You can do it directly through the Small Business Administration.
Okay, and second question, small business ownership and growth will be a crucial part of a healthy recovery. They're also a major mechanism for wealth building. However, most of the gains experienced after the last recession bypassed communities of color completely. How do we make sure Black and brown businesses are centered in these discussions and packages, and that we ensure an inclusive recovery, sir?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. And that's why, as we craft this bill, let's make sure we have transparency. One of our major disappointments in the CARES Act was that the Small Business Administration did not provide information to Congress. They didn't even provide information to the General Accounting Office that is responsible for auditing. Let's make sure that we have total transparency. And then let's not agree to a package unless we know it's targeted to those communities that traditionally have been left out, the underserved communities, the minority communities, women-owned businesses, rural small businesses. They need to be in the front of the line, not the back of the line. So let's make sure we have the resources that will get out to the underserved community. Let's target it. That's why we've said, let's work with the smaller small businesses first. Let's work with the small businesses that are located in zip codes that you have referred to that have the greatest challenges. Let's make sure they're in the front of the line, that they have an opportunity to get their help first. And let's make sure that they are either forgivable loans or grants so that they can go forward. And we need to deal with more than just payroll. We have to deal with their capital, with their ability to stay in business. So we got to be sensitive to all those needs. And the only way that's going to get done, we have to have the representatives and advocates at the table with us as we develop these programs, and we have to have total transparency as they're implemented to make sure they're being implemented properly.
And before I let you go, last week we saw the DNC. And now we're in the midst of the Republican National Convention. Are you concerned that we're not seeing these kind of issues on their platform the first night? We're not anticipating it on the second or third or even the fourth night?
We had discussions about small business at the Democratic National Convention. I was a delegate to the convention. I was very proud to hear, but I thought what we heard was a real opportunity. We want to make sure that all Americans have an opportunity in this country. And we recognize that we're not a perfect union and we have to continue our struggle. We have systemic challenges of racism in America. We have to deal with it, whether we deal with it in policing, whether we deal with it in education, whether we deal with it in healthcare, or we deal with it in our economy. We need to deal with those issues. And I think the Democratic Convention clearly made that a priority issue. And it's part of our platform, it's part of our commitment to the American people. In regards to the Republicans, facts are stubborn things. This country has done extremely poorly in dealing with COVID-19. We were not prepared. We did not respond right. We didn't have the protective equipment we needed produced in this country. The president could have done something about every one of those issues. Instead, he gave inconsistent messaging. So, he can claim whatever. We know the president's going to claim that he's done everything perfectly and anything that's gone wrong is not his fault. But the facts are the facts. And this country has suffered. And we need to deal with systemic racism. And we need bold approach to these bold problems. And look, I encourage, I'm working bipartisan with Senator Rubio, and I'll continue to do that on the small business issues. But we need bold proposals to get out of this COVID-19. We got to get it behind us. And we need leaders that are going to do this. And then we must recognize that the vulnerable communities are more vulnerable as a result of the pandemic. And we need to take advantage of COVID-19 relief to target it to the communities that really need it. I am confident that the Biden-Harris team understands that. And that was very clearly involved in a lot of our conversations that took place during the primary season. So I am confident of our ticket, committed to dealing with these inequities that exist in our society.
Senator Cardin, thank you for your passion. Thank you for your service. I so appreciate you, my senator from the state of Maryland. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to be with you. And thanks again for everything you all do. Stay well, everybody. I look forward to working with you.
Tell your wife I said hello.
I will. Thank you.
Take care. So you've heard it. You heard from an impassioned Senator Ben Cardin from the state of Maryland. It is up to you. This is not about party. This is about people. It's up to you to make the decisions about what impacts you. So now I'm going to introduce our panelists because they've been sitting back listening and they have a lot to say. We've got questions and answers for them. And guys, I want you, we're on Zoom, but we're also on Facebook Live. I love the Facebook and I love the Zoom. I want you to formulate your questions, send them in because there's going to be a moment where we're going to be able to talk to you, answer your questions. Again, this is about you. This is not about people sitting in a lofty perch. This is about you. This is about help in this historic moment of hurt and pain. So ask your questions. We're here to answer them. And I want to introduce our wonderful group of panelists who have bared with me before this conversation. We've just had a great conversation about this moment in history and what's needed. So I want to start off with panelist Keith Corbett, Executive Vice President of the Center for Responsible Lending. Hello, Keith. We're going to go to Maurice E. John, CEO, PPC, Leftwich, formerly Deputy Administrator for SBA, Small Business Administration. Maurice A. Jones, CEO and President of Local Initiative Support Corporation. And then we're going to go to C. Leroy Cavazos, Renya, Vice President of the Government and International Affairs, U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Congress. Welcome all. Hello. How are you?
Just fine.
Oh, I don't like that. I was like, okay, just fine. Hello. How are you?
Fantastic.
Good,
That's
good.
what I'm talking about because we need to uplift people today.
April,
Hello,
thank
April.
you so much, April. You're such a breath of fresh air to the great American people, and God bless the great state of Maryland and the
Amen.
Senator Ben Cardin. Thank you so much for having us.
I love Leroy. I love you. Thank you so much. So guys, I'm going to open this up to everyone and then I have targeted questions for each of you. And I want to start off with Keith, and then we're going to go to Marie, then we're going to go to Maurice, and then we're going to go to Leroy. So, given your range of experiences in small business lending, can you explain some of the barriers that typically hinder access to capital, which is big in our community for businesses owned by women and people of color? 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay. First, I want to start with a lack of banking relationships. One of the things that I've been in the financial services business for about 40 years, and currently you do not see skilled Black bankers of color. There was a period when the banking relationships are, commercial banking relationships are based on the relationship with the commercial banker. And so we go to a lot of conferences, and there are a lot of government relations Black people, but there are few commercial bankers.
Mm-hmm.
Credit scores is another problem. A lot of the small Black businesses use their personal credit scores as opposed to white businesses. And we're also faced with non-traditional lenders like the FinCap, the different things. And so Black businesses, and the number one problem that I see is the fear of rejection. Historically, we've been rejected quite a bit in the banking system. So, and that's because we don't have the relationships. But one of the things I would love to see is bringing back an effort to train commercial bankers and put them in the community again.
That's good. That's a good point. It's all about relationship. Marie?
Thank you, April, and thank you to Lisa and for the invitation, and just a pleasure to be with everyone. So many of the things that Senator Cardin spoke about, we could talk about for quite some time this evening, because I agreed with much of what he had to say. Keith, I agree with all of your comments as well. In 30 seconds, what I'll point to right now and drill down a little bit later is that for our community, we have a lack of awareness in terms of resources that are available. During my time at the SBA, it struck me that too many times I did not see Black organizations, Black business owners come to visit me at the agency. And so that led me to work with my team to start different outreach efforts just to connect. And that work needs to continue because our business community needs to understand what resources are out there and how to access those resources. We don't do that enough. And secondly, again, for this brief answer, I want to get on the table the need for data. The SBA and other government agencies, when it comes to Black businesses and the support that they receive, we need to have more data because you can't really fix what you can't measure. If you don't know how well you're doing, then you don't know where the gaps are and where more services need to be put on the table. So I'll stop there. Awareness and data are the 2 points that I want to emphasize at this point.
Relationship, awareness, and data. I like that. Everyone write this down. Write this down. Get your pen and paper and write this down. This is an important conversation that you don't always get. And they're trying to help you. Write this down. Maurice.
Sure. Thanks, April. Nice to be with all of you all. Let me just add in 30 seconds, 2 or 3 others. Look, let's not avoid the fact that discrimination is still a barrier for women and people of color getting sufficient access to capital. Let's not dress it up. It still exists. The wealth gap between whites and people of color often leaves women and people of color in a place where they don't have the cash reserves. They don't have the access to family wealth that you need in order to get additional wealth. Wealth breeds other wealth. So that's a couple of other things. Look, for our Latinx and other brothers and sisters, traditional banking partners not having the language and the cultural competencies to actually be good partners is another barrier that we see. And then I would just end with, you often have to have a credit history in order to get access to capital. And because of discrimination and other things going on here that we're all talking about, the lack of a credit history is also a barrier for women and people of color accessing additional capital. So I would just add those things to what my colleagues here have already articulated.
So Keith, it was relationship. Marie, yours was what and data?
Awareness.
Awareness and data. And Maurice?
Discrimination, wealth gap, language, credit history.
All right. Leroy, what can you add to this?
Well, April, you know, the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce represents 4.8 million Hispanic-owned firms across this country that aggregately contribute $800 billion to the U.S. economy. And we've come to realize that it is our social and economic responsibility to change power structures in this country. We need the people who have access to the capital to look like us. We need people in boardrooms across corporate America to be Black and brown. We need people who have the power of the pen to stroke those lending checks, to understand the way that we grew up and the way that our communities need to access lending. When Senator Cardin's remarks, the work that he tirelessly has fought to do around set-asides for Cdfis is so critical, because we know that that is the first stop for a lot of minority-owned businesses out there to go seek additional funding to help their business evolve. So my thing is, we have to take the bull by its horns, and we must inject ourselves into the decision and lending tables of America, where we are the ones that are actually the ability to control the capital and to lend the capital.
Wow. And you know, Leroy, it goes back to something that I've heard from people who look like us in Washington. It's one thing, we have to now learn how to play the game. We have to not just play the game, but be a part of the game and own the game, because so many other people own the game. We have to now own the game, not just be at the table, but own the game. So powerful, impactful. So now I'm going to hit each and every one of you with a question. This is your expertise. Keith, have these issues been exacerbated by COVID-19? And how does this fit with provisions in the CARE Act?
Okay, yes, they have. They were highlighted because in the first round, there were businesses, Black businesses that had, that particularly churches, that put their funds in the bank every Sunday, and they couldn't even get heard from the banks or didn't get a seat. And I work, our sister organization is a credit union, self-help credit union. We did over 1,700 loans totaling $183 million, 63% to people of color, 66% to nonprofits. We maintained 19,985 jobs, and the median loan size was 20,800. We made loans as low as $1,300 in the PPP program, but that $1,300 meant a great deal to that small Black business owner. And so that has been, so you saw that, and you saw in the first round, particularly, the large businesses got their money first. And so yes, it fits in because we don't have the relationships. You can't call your bank, or your banker is not going to reach out to you and say, hey, we got this PPP loan. If you're a person of color, you're not likely to get that.
Back to your original point, relationships. Marie, what additional interventions are needed to ensure vulnerable businesses and communities are not left out of the recovery?
This is such a rich discussion, and I can really tie on to comments that all of my colleagues have made. But to talk about a couple things in particular, Senator Cardin mentioned the Community Advantage Program. And this also relates to comments that Leroy made, and Maurice and Keith as well, that we need to have people who look like us, who understand our circumstances, who understand our communities and where our businesses operate, in order to really be the best relational lenders for us. And so that's why I was delighted when we launched the Community Advantage Program at the SBA, because it was the first time that non-depository lenders, our so-called mission lenders, CDFIs, and community banks were brought into the SBA's guaranteed programs. And that program does need to be made permanent, and it needs to be expanded. I'm a big fan of CDFIs and the work that Maurice and other leaders do, because those are very special types of lenders and business partners, because not only can they provide capital, but they also can provide the technical assistance that makes the capital work. Because the last thing we want is for small businesses to get access to capital, but not have the right infrastructure and the right tools in place to manage that capital well. So that's one point. And next I would want to offer is that the fact that Maurice is right, discrimination is real. And so we have to have stronger watchdogs on the big banks to ensure that they are playing by the rules and treating customers fairly. I'm also aware of I'm affiliated with a community bank here in Washington, D.C., and I'm well aware that we had potential customers come to our bank because they had longstanding relationships with larger banks, but still couldn't get access and recognition for their desire to apply for a PPP loan. So that's got to stop, and we need to implement the rules and just make sure there's a heavier cudgel used when big banks aren't playing by the rules. And we need more and stronger minority-led banks, because that also is part of the huge gap in our infrastructure right now. We just don't have enough minority lenders who understand these communities and can serve them more appropriately.
And I'm going to throw this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, and one last point quickly. We also need to make sure that we are, well, I'll stop there, April. I know you'll come back to us. I don't want to.
Well, I want to ask you real quick, and I don't know who would know, but I'm sure within this esteemed group, you know, how many Black-owned banks are there, or minority-owned banks are there in this nation right now?
The last I heard, it was 18, April. And when I started in the business, there were 69 Black-owned banks. And
wait a minute, say this again, 69 Black-owned banks?
When I first started in the business in 1978, and there were 39 Black insurance companies. Now I think it's around 18 Black banks and 0 Black insurance companies.
It's been a precipitous drop. I do know. I'm glad Keith knew the exact number, but that's part of the. We have to attack these issues from all sides of the problem, from the Main Street business in our neighborhood corridors to those who have access to create larger entities and focus on building our own institutions. We've got to have both ends of the spectrum represented in how we are approaching these.
And this moment in time shows that it's not racial. Other places don't pay attention to us, and we need our own to take care of our own. And that's the unfortunate reality. It's not about being racist, it's about just the reality of the moment. I want to go now to Maurice. Maurice, how can governmental entities, financial institutions, and the philanthropic sector better collaborate to overcome these obstacles? Boy, they're obstacles. Unmute yourself. I can't hear you. I need to hear you, Maurice. Okay, wait a minute. Okay. We're working on it. Hold on. Don't go anywhere, Maurice. Can I unmute you? No, I can't unmute you.
There it is. There it is.
There you go. I hear that voice. There you go, Maurice.
They got me muted because they know I might say something that they don't want to have recorded. So I apologize. I promise I'm going to try to stay, I'm going to try to keep it all above board. Look, we hit on some of the things that government entities can do. They need to invest much more aggressively at a much greater scale in the CDFIs out there and the minority depository institutions out there, organizations whose primary mission, and this is the key, whose primary mission is serving Black and brown communities, serving low wealth communities. We've got Thousands of these organizations, the combination of CDFIs and MDIs out there, they are every year making billions of dollars in investments, but that infrastructure needs to be larger because it is not large enough to serve the need. That's one thing. The second thing is there are pieces of legislation that are moving through now that we hope move through. The House passed the HEROES Act, which provides about $1 billion for that CDFI infrastructure. Senator Warner and other it's a bipartisan group of legislators, has a piece of legislation called the Jobs and Neighborhood Investment Act that provides $18 billion to this infrastructure that I just mentioned. The CARES Act and CDBG dollars. As we look at PPP, there are some changes that we need to make. You were talking to Senator Cardin about some of those, and we can talk a little later, but for example, every loan that is $150,000 or less ought to be automatically forgiven under the PPP. And then I want to talk, you asked about the philanthropic sector. We've been really encouraged. The corporate sector and the philanthropic sector have really stepped up with us to serve small businesses. We've gotten about $100 million in grants from the corporate sector. I'm talking about Truist Bank, I'm talking about Lowe's, I'm talking about Walmart and Sam's, organizations that, Netflix, and they've provided about $100 million to us. We've used those to make grants to these small businesses because in this season, they need grants. Many of them are not in a position to take on more debt. And we've provided grants of $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, up to $25,000. And those grants have been significant contributors to small businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses. Over 90% of our recipients are businesses led by people of color, and it has helped them stay open. It has helped them pay vendors. It has helped them pay utilities, pay their rent. We, public and private sector, need to and can make a huge impact if we just step up in this moment and do this sort of thing and continue it for quite some time. So I'll stop there. We can talk more later, but there's lots to be done in the private sector, the corporate sector, and the philanthropic sector. We're encouraged because we have actually seen more support for our small business work this year than in any other year in the history of LISC, and we've been around for about 40 years.
Wow. C. Leroy Cavazos, Reina, what say you? What community financial resources would you recommend a business owner look for assistance?
Well, April, that's a great question. And I think that right now, a business owner is in such dire need and their economic vitality is on the line that they need to go look for lending in diversified places. Right now, it's the time to hold your banker accountable where you have your personal checking account. Right now is the time for you to go look for the Cdfi down the street. Right now is the time to look at American corporations who are offering deferment on payments and who are offering grants to small businesses in order to help in the business recovery. Right now is the time to make sure that you are adequately monitoring your accounts payable and your accounts receivable so that there's some type of balance there. We are going to rise out of this pandemic together. And right now we need to hold on to whatever lifeline we have to keep our minority businesses open, to keep the economy running, because at the end of the day, minorities in this country is what drives the economic vibrancy of America. For the Latino community, we are 61 million strong, and our buying power really defines how the American economy continues to thrive. And so if we can do everything in our power to hang on to that hope, to work with our banks, to get that small extra loan, we will prevail out of this together. And our Black and brown communities will come out of this stronger than ever. And we have to have that hope, because this pandemic has created a shift in the way that American society will forever treat our communities going forward. The social events that have occurred in this country in the last 3 months have defined a path forward. People have died on the streets of America. And because of that, minority-owned businesses will come out of this stronger than ever, April.
Oh, resilience is the key. Resilience is the key. All right, so we've got a hot round of questions. Are you guys ready for this hot round? I feel like I'm a talk show host. I feel like I'm a game show host. Hot round, here we go. You ready, guys? Okay. So it's for any of you to answer, but we need short and succinct answers as much as you can. Okay, looking forward, guys. What are the structural changes we need to make to ensure equitable access to capital and small business supports more broadly? What are the changes that we need structurally? Hot round, whoever, jump in. Go ahead, Maurice, I see you, go ahead.
I'll put one out there. The Community Reinvestment Act has been the biggest incentive for mainstream banks to invest in low wealth communities all across the country. It needs to be reformed and updated. It needs to be done, though, in a way that is actually helpful to these communities, that provides incentives for more investment in these communities. And so that's a tool that needs to be updated, and it needs to be more aggressive to provide more incentives for capital to flow into low wealth communities.
All right, anyone else want to contribute to that?
Okay, I would say quickly that the one thing that needs to happen is a micro lending program at the SBA. The ceiling needs to be increased, say double the size of the loans at minimum, in order to make that capital, which is some of the most easily accessed in the government, available to more small businesses.
Okay, go ahead, Keith. Go ahead, Keith.
They've got him muted like they had me.
Keith, okay, all right. Can you unmute Keith?
I have three things. Streamline forgiveness under the PPP, a shift targeted, and I'll piggyback on Maurice, to grant programs for business of color. Compare this to the $1,200 stimulus checks that individuals got. They should give those to Black businesses. And better data collection on small business lending across the board. The lack of data is hurting us.
Okay, all right. So now we have one more question. We got one more question, and I'm going to go to questions from everyone. I'm going to go to the questions that everyone is asking. So guys, please fill up the chat, ask more questions, because we're going to be asking questions. We started a little late, so we're going to end at 7:09. So we got a little bit more time, but I got one more question for this hot round. I like the hot round. Are there any specific federal policies or administrative changes you'd like to see advanced at this time, this moment?
Right now, April, I'm going to take that question because I'm very passionate about what changes we need to see in an administration that continues to suppress minority communities across this country. We need to make sure that we work with our elected leaders in Congress to change procurement policies and to allow businesses of color to be able to access the federal procurement chain of the United States of America. We need to stop being the subcontractors of this country, and we need to have the opportunity to be prime contractors in the American supply chain, and we need to be able to access those federal contracts so that our businesses can grow and scale. That is something that I know that this administration, a future administration, could act on and could develop technical assistance resource centers to teach our communities how to access federal contracting.
All right, well, thank you so much. Now we're going to go straight to you. Those of you who are on this Zoom call and those of you who are on Facebook Live, we see you. We see you. Okay. This question is from Madeline M. Okay. The question is, are any organizations working with and or investing in new CDFI startups that have a solution for minority businesses? Great question. Take it away, whomever.
So I can say, look, we work with new CDFIs and established CDFIs. And what we're doing is trying to work with them to provide access to capital to them. We're also working with them to purchase loans that they're making to small minority-owned businesses so they have more liquidity. So the answer to that is, yeah, there are CDFIs that are working with other CDFIs, both new and established, all over the country. And I'd be happy to follow up with that question later.
Anyone else on that?
Yeah, our credit union self-help has worked with CDFIs to help establish and to make the CDFI community much stronger as well.
And by the way, they don't have to be certified CDFIs.
Okay, and someone asked, what resources, organizations, or people should we contact first to get loans and grants? I mean, that's a basic question. People need the basics.
I mean, that's a basic question. That's a basic question, April. And I always tell people that right now, it's not a time in America where we need to be vilifying financial institutions. Financial institutions right now are small business and minority business. They're our friends because they're the ones that have the power of the pen. They're the ones that have the ability to wire you a loan. They're the ones that have the technical assistance to get you a loan, to get you a good interest rate, to keep your doors open and keep your business running. So the simple question to that is, ladies and gentlemen, wherever there's a logo on your checkbook and wherever you have a banking relationship, and if you don't have that banking relationship, you need to look for a CDFI in your community, because our financial institutions are the ones that have the power to lend. So if they have the power to lend, then we as minority communities have to have the power and the will to befriend them.
All right. Well, here's the next question. Okay, I'm not sure I understand, but I'm sure you guys will. This is kind of intricate. Kaiser Permanente -LISC, Inclusive Economic Opportunity Partnership, is a program that is making funding available. What other programs are like this?
What did it say? What other programs are like this?
Yes.
So just to tell you what that program is, we and that's LISC and Kaiser has a $60 million partnership to do inclusive economic development. Inclusive economic development has three pieces to it. We make loans to small businesses. We make grants to community-based organizations that are providing workforce development services. And we are making loans to developers who are building commercial corridors, basically revamping or recasting real estate so that businesses can actually set up shop in low wealth communities, in Black and brown communities. We bring the three together. That's what we mean by inclusive economic development. We're doing that with Kaiser in California and then in Kaiser markets all over the country. So these folks can reach out to local LISC offices, of which there are about 35 around the country, to actually get more information on this inclusive economic development approach that we use.
And here's a question from Lamont. Lamont, I see you. I think you're one of the only people I see beyond us on this call. Thank you for zooming in. He says, how can we invest in community development corporations that are located in the business corridor? Thank you, Lamont.
Well, I think that Congress has very intentionally been investing in those communities. But the fact of the matter is that we had to advocate so hard as minorities to get a $16 billion set aside for CDFIs. That should be a no-brainer. That should be a no-brainer, because this Congress and this government knows that minority communities go to CDFIs to get their lending. And they know that those are the types of lenders out in the community that can make these loans, especially those who are considered opportunity zone CDFIs. And so the fact that we're having to have this tumultuous fight on appropriations in Congress, and that we're still here sitting after the House of Representatives passed another stimulus bill, and we're still here waiting 3 months later for the Senate to act, is another testament on how we have to fight 10 times as hard, and how we have to justify our economic existence in this country to go the extra mile. So Lamont, that's a great question, because the lending is there. We just have to continuously fight to bring it out to our communities and to define it and to give our businesses the technical assistance that they need to access.
And April, if I could tie on to what Leroy just said, and he's absolutely right. Part of the challenge is that the small business community does not have the same throw weight, if you will, when it comes to influencing policy that large companies do. And that's a big challenge, because you know this better than anybody, April, that your voice has to be heard. You have to be part of a strong collective voice in order to get the policymakers to listen and to respond. And so I just want to put a word in for the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, the U.S. Black Chamber. I think chambers are very important. I think that small businesses need to figure out a way to join, even your local chamber, figure out a way to join an organization that is going to help you plead your case, make your point, demand what your fair share when the policymakers are divvying up the pie. Because often our small businesses, I'm a small business owner, we are not heard in all the voices of the larger businesses that often sway decisions.
Okay. Yes.
Center for Responsible Lending, that's what we try to do. Being affiliated with a credit union, we try to speak for the small businesses. We try to we walk the halls of Congress, and we walk the halls in the states to make accessible, affordable lending to everyone, not just in commercial, but also even in residential. But that's what we thrive to do at the Center for Responsible Lending.
All right. So with time winding down, we've got a couple of comments, and then we got a question. A comment: laws prohibiting predatory lending to small businesses. That's what we need. That's a comment. Another one: support services for small businesses, very important. Strategic planning, financial planning, and coaching, but most businesses cannot afford this. Is there potential for funding for supporting services?
The answer is yes. I should have mentioned that what LISC does is provide grants to small businesses plus grants to that business ecosystem that this person is talking about: consultants, technology consultants, accelerators, incubators. And the private sector actually has been the biggest funder of this for us. We also receive some money, believe it or not, from HUD that helps us build the capacity of this system. So the answer is yes, there is funding for that. There's grant funding for that. We need more, though, much more. It is as important as the actual loan dollars that we make to these businesses. The small businesses need the same kind of business ecosystem around them that the big businesses have. They can pay McKinsey and Bain and all the rest. We need to be able to do that and help the small businesses do that as well. So it's that question is right on point.
Well, guys, I want to thank you for enlightening me, enlightening all those on Zoom and Facebook Live. We need these discussions. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I just want to thank you guys for having me with this webinar, Directing Capital to Small Businesses in Underserved Communities, Challenges and Opportunities in the Wake of COVID-19. I thank you. I'm April Ryan, White House correspondent for the American Urban Radio Networks and CNN political analyst. I do a lot of other things too. I'm a mama, but that's a whole nother story. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. But guys, I thank you so much for this important conversation. And I want to turn this over to my friend, Lisa Rice. Lisa, thank you for having me.
April, thank you so much for joining us. We are so honored that you took time out of your busy schedule. I know how busy you are, and you're doing the hard work that some of us, and I'm going to admit, me, don't want to do, because there's certain things I don't want to watch. So I just follow you on Twitter, April, and I get off. I get off.
Did you see my IG live last night with Ice Cube? Woo, yeah. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But yeah.
I'm watching your IG live tonight.
Yes, please do.
And everybody else watch it too. Thank you all so much for joining us for this wonderful, amazing discussion. Maurice Jones, my dear, dear friend, Keith Corbett. Thank you so much, my dear friend, Marie Johns and C. Leroy. I just met them tonight, and I'm telling you, I'm grafting you guys into my family. You're part of the web now. Thank you all so much for lending us your time and your expertise. You all just, I learned so much, and I hope that our audience did too. I want to remind everybody that we did record this event, and we will be promoting the recording on all of our websites. So you can go to LISC's website, you can go to the website for the Center for Responsible Lending, and you can also go to the National Fair Housing Alliance's website in order to access this recording so that you can share it with other folks in your network. You heard Marie John say awareness. We have to be aware, and we have to educate one another. So please watch it. It'll be available also on our YouTube channels. And I also want to remind you all, there's an important piece of legislation. If you've not heard about it, I'm going to tell you right now. It's called the HEROES Act. Many of the provisions that you heard our panelists talking about tonight are included in that HEROES Act, including making grants to small businesses and making grants to communities so that we can support our local neighborhoods throughout this COVID-19 pandemic. The House has already passed the HEROES Act, so we need you all to call your senators and tell your senators that you want them to pass the HEROES Act, because that law contains many of the reparative solutions that we need in order to bring equity into our communities. So with that, I thank you all again for joining us, and have an amazing evening. And don't forget to watch April on IG Live tonight.
All right, yes, ADR 1600, at ADR 1600. Bye.
ADR 1600. Okay, we got it.
You all stay well.
Everybody.